All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for sticking around and hanging out. This panel, we're going to talk about high-end collectibles, prop replicas, studios, everything that, we love to collect as far as Star Wars. I think we should go through the introductions and kind of meet the panelists. Let's start ladies first over here, Miss Nilda.
Hi, so I'm Nilda. I have a YouTube channel called Appetite for Collectibles, and I mostly just do all collectibles with like sideshow statues. I like to interview celebrities and just attend cons. And most of the things that I like to really collect is just like the vintage little Kenner toys. So yeah, that's what it is all
Which
about.
are high-end collectibles now.
OG all the way.
OG all the way.
Yeah.
I'm Brandon Winnerty. I'm the host of Talking Bay 94, which is a Star Wars podcast where I interview cast and crew. That's pretty much it, but I love behind the scenes. And I write for StarWars.com and Star Wars Insider. I wrote the upcoming Star Wars Encyclopedia coming out this fall. But what I love is behind the scenes. And so a lot of the stuff that I collect, especially in the high-end side, is related to behind the scenes and then cast and crew items and like found objects. But I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about it.
Very cool. Very, very cool. I'm Michael Hawes. I haven't been on social media too much, but some of you may or may not know me as the Star Killer 77. Got a personal YouTube channel, and of course, my sidekick and host, my brother here, Gabe from Collection Wars, which kind of the whole reason that the collecting thing really, known in the community was the love for collecting and then again, we also just opened up a restaurant called the Dark Side Brick Oven Pizza Company. Have y'all heard of that yet? It's in Bernie, Texas, right outside of San Antonio. And it's kind of funny that you mentioned the behind the scenes because one of the props that we have up there is the big Wampa, and he's dragging Luke Skywalker through the snow. And I always tell people when I jump on the mic at the restaurant I love the behind the scenes, the scene, behind the scenes. And it's like the story behind the story, right? And you don't ever see it captured on film, but then if you go there and you see that prop that we have on display, you see the real deal getting dragged through the snow, and there's a story right there.
You pick the pieces up and you
yeah, it's awesome. So that's very cool. Just found that out about you.
Yeah. And my name is Gabriel Estrada. I'm on social media, Star Wars Replicas. I've been doing a YouTube channel where I do unboxings of the Star Wars replicas, and obviously on Instagram and TikTok. Even though I get a little
I made fun of him. TikTok is just
being on TikTok.
I don't do it either. I watch it. I can't do it.
But he's got like over 500,000 followers, so you can't. But yeah, he'd do these silly little dance things. I'm like, Gabe, what are you doing?
He's messing around.
He's
Or
doing
he's
like
trying to convince his daughters to join Star Wars.
I do not do silly dances.
Yeah, he does it. He does.
But no, yeah. So my focus is licensed prop replicas, and yeah, the social media. It's allowed me to work with some awesome companies like Regal Robot and EFX Collectibles and Danu Novo and a lot of the licensed high-end prop replica companies, which is going to be what my part's going to be. And I want to talk to you guys about that and would love to answer any questions. By the way, this is going to be interactive. This is one of those panels where I encourage you to look at your phones, and especially if you happen to follow us and you look on it. If you have any questions on something on our, from the collections or anything, we'll open that up in a bit. But yeah, I think let's start with a little bit about just collecting. What got you into collecting, and kind of how you focus that in. And I think let's start there.
So I think with me, with collecting, I did like the typical thing, like I was collecting Funko Pops. And eventually, when you have like over 3,000 Funko Pops in your house and you're just looking around going, what can I do with these? I started drifting off from like Funko Pops to Black Series, and then that just got even worse because I kept buying a whole bunch of bookcases, and it just kept overtaking my apartment. And then I remember during COVID, you're home, you're bored, so what were you doing? You were spending all your money and buying toys. And then eventually, I started drifting off into like the Star Wars community that we're all part of on Facebook. And I remember one of my really good friends, Seth, had taken me to a comic book shop, and I first saw my first sideshow piece, which was Darth Maul sitting on his chair for the Solo film. And instantly I bought that and then started getting rid of all my Funko Pops and all my Black Series and started diving deep into sideshow pieces. And then I went from 1 to then 40. And then it just went from like one section on my wall to now like a whole entire room. But little by little, I started seeing how I wanted things to be, and eventually I just focused on certain things. And I feel when you first start collecting, you want to collect everything, and then eventually you start piecing down what you want. So
Rabbit hole.
yeah, it's a bad rabbit hole. So I just started primarily just focusing on stuff that I love, which was, the OT. I'm a big Ewoks fanatic, so I have a whole vintage collection of all the Ewoks. I have the phone, the original VHS tapes, and I have all the original Kenner figures that are graded by CAS. And then I just focused on all the prequel stuff. So I just primarily just stuck with that, and that's where we are now.
I think that's a great thing to call out, is like focusing is so important.
Yes.
Because especially with these high-end things, or like anything beyond the price of a Black Series or a Funko, you can get way over it. And so if you are like, here's what I like, here's what I'm collecting. So for me, again, behind the scenes, a lot of what I have focused in on, right, again, I grew up kind of collecting action figures, and I've had a collection for my entire life. But now as I've curated and as I get older, it's a lot of the people that I've interviewed kind of inspire, like, oh, I should see what I can get that represents a Tauntaun or represents, and I've been lucky to interview a lot of the people like Phil Tippett or like Dennis Muren or like whoever, and then having a piece of theirs in my home is extra special. And that's even with autographs or anything like that. Like, I like collecting autographs from the people that I've interviewed. And so again, I'm very lucky where I can have that be my specific niche. But a lot of it is, we'll talk about Regal Robot, but Regal Robot is, I think, the best collectible company out there right now, just because of how specific they are, and they do a lot of just behind the scenes, just maquette replicas, and that team is so focused on that area, and they do it so well, and that's been where my main focus has been now. So,
Nice. So I'm definitely the OG guy for sure. First off, we are. It's safe to say we're all collectors in this room. Are we collectors? Okay, good deal. Make sure that we're on the right track here. So I was 7 years old. Like, a lot of us, I think, are going to have this similar story, but maybe happened maybe a little differently. But I feel very fortunate that, I was there at the beginning when Star Wars was released. I was able to see it in the drive-in movie theater. Yes, I'm a little older than these guys, but yeah. So it's just what it did for me as a child growing up. I was didn't have any brothers or sisters. I was home a lot by myself, and so I just really focused in on Star Wars, that impact that it had on me, and just started collecting. And at 54 years old, millions of dollars later, literally. But it's funny that you were talking about focusing in when it comes to collecting, and this is something that Gabe and I talk a lot about on Collection Wars, is the rabbit hole, and when is enough, or so focusing in on what it is that you like, and maybe not just Star Wars. What if it's a card collection, or a baseball card collection, or it could be anything related to any type of toy. But the issues that I ran into is, and I think a lot of us have run into, is we just start collecting. We want to have everything. But I think that what happens is when you start losing that love, like you get something else and you just don't have that feeling of like, oh, look what I just got, then you got a problem. So, and then you're starting to like stack things on top of each other, and you're starting to, and Gabe and I love to talk about this because we get asked a lot, on our show, is that, we get asked, so if there was a fire, what would you keep? What would you grab or hold on to, on the way out? And it's a good point, because I think a lot of it might be, if it's just simple, like a Darth Vader action figure that you still have, that's your original piece, that might not be absolutely not the most valuable piece, but to you, what it does for you is what matters. And where I'm at in my life right now, having I don't know if you guys have seen my gallery. I have a 5,000 square foot gallery at home, and it's beautiful. But there's a time where I don't get a lot of time spent in there because it's separate from the house. But when I do get in there, I get to focus on a lot of the things in there. But at the same time, it's like, when is enough enough? And I have definitely slowed down on a lot of the, because all these new cool 6-scale toys are always coming out, and then, there's a little bit of everything, whether it's the new Hasbro toys are coming out, and it's like, golly, I just don't know. But I do have a complete collection of the original 77 or 78 through, 85 figures and play sets and stuff. And those are what really brings it home to me in my heart. And
Studio scale. I mean,
and
come on, Michael.
Yeah,
Okay.
but nothing smells better than having like that vintage toy and like smelling it. And I know Michael knows this because
Yes.
anytime I've picked up a play set, I've literally have smelled it.
Absolutely.
And I'm just,
I don't know anybody that's a true collector doesn't smell their toys.
Yeah.
That's a good candle idea, and that's the next.
Yes.
Kenner vintage.
and a
candle.
vintage smell.
And so, yeah, so obviously, and if you have, has anybody not seen my collection? Because, and I'm just want to say, so I'm really into, and this is a very expensive hobby, but I just love it. It's studio scale models. Has anybody ever been into those or know anything about studios? Yeah. Yeah, and you have done, Eric, some really cool stuff. So when it comes to studio scale, and for those of you that may not know, they're models that may or may not have, depending on the scale, been in Star Wars. And me personally, it's 99.99 of my stuff is all scratch-built studio scale models. They're not, nothing wrong with it, but they're not 3D models. Anywhere from an 8-foot Avenger Star Destroyer, and then my recent 10-foot medical frigate from Empire Strikes Back. It's all scratch-built.
Yeah. And we'll get, because I want to talk more about that, because
Sure.
that is definitely, when we talk about collecting, there's all these categories, right? There's categories that we start getting into. And that's why this is, honestly, like this panel, when I was thinking about it, this is a great panel because it does cover those categories that are kind of
Diverse.
the higher end ones of those, right? So, you got the vintage, even though Michael kind of does a lot of everything. But Michael is really, in the community, he's known as the studio scale guy. I mean, he really is. Like, I know he has way more than that, but the studio scale stuff is just so impressive. And especially when you're talking about scratch building, right? When he says that means that they found each individual model piece, because they built them from old models from like tanks and airplanes and all that. And each little piece, they find each little part and create these things. But we'll get more into that. And then obviously, I've been focusing on the replica stuff, right? And kind of giving you a little bit of history and a little bit of that, because it comes into play when you start getting into collecting, especially pricing, right? You got licensed and unlicensed stuff, right? And in our community, that's become a thing because the fandom is so big that, there's stuff that licensed Star Wars companies are not making. So now with 3D printing and all that, there's a lot of people that are making great quality stuff. But again, I focused my collection on the licensed stuff. And the reason why I focused on that is because I wanted that attachment for the lineage, right? I wanted some type of thread connecting me to the films, right? And whether it's, it was made from the mold that they use, or they 3D scan something in the archives, or there's a found part, right? A part that they used, that the model makers or the prop makers used in their stuff, and it happens to be on my thing. So something to connect me to those films. That's why I started going with the licensed stuff. So if you guys have seen, my collection, you'll notice I focus on, helmets, on the lightsabers, some studio scale stuff, but it really is all the licensed stuff. Again, mostly because of that attachment, that connection. But again, we were just at the droid builders, at the R2 builders panel, and I'm part of it. I'm a R2D2 builder, right? I built my own R2, and that's just as satisfying than just being able to purchase something, to actually build it yourself. But yeah, so I think let's talk a little bit about, when we talk about collecting and when is enough, Nilda, how have you, figured out how you're going to display them, and at what point does your display and your limitation for displaying this kind of inhibit your collecting?
So when I first started collecting, I had all the, the IKEA glass cases, and I actually had one explode on me at my house, and it was just glass everywhere. So if any of you guys buy that, the Detox, I 100% do not recommend the glass cabinets. It was like crazy to walk in there, and I'm just looking around going, what happened to my collection? But what I ended up doing was I ended up buying like these really expensive, they're called Billy bookcases from IKEA. And basically I made my whole entire collection kind of into a story. So each shelf is of every different Star Wars category, like every different film. So I have like one shelf just dedicated to all the Ewoks. I have one shelf just dedicated to, New Hope, to Revenge of the Sith, like all the different movies. And what I ended up doing was, I focused on just making it just like that. And then I started making a list of certain things that just didn't properly fit into that collection. Kind of like how Michael said, you kind of go into that rabbit hole and you start buying a whole bunch of random stuff that you really don't need. And I ended up just getting rid of some of it. I donated some of it to my neighbor's kid because I could tell that, they wanted toys. So I figured I'd give them a whole bunch of stuff. But, I have a shelf just dedicated just to helmets, but that's how I've limited my collection, with just having certain things. And, now, like how you said it, going to the cons, my biggest thing now is collecting autographs. I'll do, if I take a photo with one of the celebrities, I like getting a plaque with their signature on it. And, I like doing that because it's a more memorable moment for me, because I have the experience of like saying, I was with this person and I captured that moment and they signed something for me. And I feel like that's more intimate, instead of like, just buying something off, like an auction or anything.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Brent?
I have to be real careful talking about space limitations because my wife is in the crowd, and about what the.
She's like, hi.
Right.
I think we're all in that.
She's like, watch what you have to
we're
say
all trying
right
to-
now.
Which is, I have an office, right? And my office is pretty small. It's probably is bigger than this stage, but not that much bigger. And so I really have a pretty limited amount of space I can use. And the other thing I really collect very heavily is books and reference books, because I write so much for .com and Insider and the books. And so it's helpful to just have a library, and I love collecting all of that. And so I have the Billy bookcases that are sagging, which is a whole other issue, but because of the reference books, right? Those big coffee table books. But that's really where those live. And so now, especially with Regal, I've had to kind of separate the space. So I have a separate space that is pretty much just for the Regal maquettes, and then I also collect their Indiana Jones line. So they have like the Sankara Stone and the Grail, and what's the other one that I'm missing?
There's the Grail.
The Urn of Narachi,
Yeah.
right? And so anyway, all that's kind of in its own space above my podcast recording studio. Because then the other thing, again, just talking about space and talking about limitations, one thing that I found a lot of joy in recently that a lot of these companies are now going to is sketches from especially talent. So Regal has been doing a lot of legacy editions featuring, like, you get a Bib Fortuna maquette, but it also has a sketch from Phil Tippett, who designed Bib Fortuna. You're like, oh, well, again, it makes it more one of one. A lot of your stuff it's pretty much one of one compared to stuff that even has a run of 80 or the runs of thousands, like Black Series or whatever it is. And so, like, making myself a little bit more compact, especially on the art side. I like collecting a lot from the people that worked on the movies and seeing how much I can really do. That is a one of one. Another thing that is really easy, like if you're thinking about like ground level easy things that are easy to store or frame, the animation cells from droids and Ewoks, again, are one of ones. They were used in Star Wars. You can find them really easy. You can find beautiful ones for like $100, but like really beautiful art pieces. And that's a really nice foray into not even a replica, but a real piece of Star Wars history. And there's a lot like that around if you look.
Yeah. I know. We talk about space a lot, Michael.
Michael
and I
has
know
no space.
You're one of you're
5,000.
You're one of the fortunate ones that
This is a funny story. When I'm at Darkside, every once in a while I like to get on and just talk about why Darkside exists and the nostalgia of Darkside and, all of the stuff that's in there. And Denise and I, my wife, Denise, we talk about it, and because a lot of people would like to come out and visit Starkiller Ranch, and it's just, can't have all these people coming out to the house, right? So when I came up with the concept of Darkside, I'm like, So, we could build this museum-style place, and, we could have pizzas there, and it could be a real deal. And Denise is like, I think this is an excuse for you to buy more stuff. And I'm like, no, babe, not at all. And no, this is Superman, or no, this is Back to the Future. It's not Star Wars.
Completely different.
Completely, 100%. But I'm good now, though, So.
Well, yeah. I mean, even when I first met Michael and we started doing the Collection Wars, again, that was our common ground, right? We became really good friends because, we had this space that we really made it look nice. Like Michael focused his room kind of like a Death Star scene. And if you've ever seen his original collection room, that's what it looks like. It looks like you walk into the Death Star, and it's like this cool space. Yeah. For you that have seen my space, the way I have it made, I try to do it more museum style, right? I really wanted to focus on like it looking like a museum. And I think one of the things for limitation purposes, and I'll kind of speak for Michael, because again, I've known him for such a long time.
Yeah.
He blended all his collections into that one space to the point where it got to he was like, well, all the studio skill models are taking so much room that he had to build a separate gallery just for studio skill. And that was the funnest part about watching your collection, not only expand, but kind of really getting more specific to, the categories that they're in. So on my end, I'm like Brandon. My collection room, when you watch my YouTube or Instagram or whatever, a lot of
TikTok dances.
My TikTok dances,
Yeah.
Or spinning around in a chair.
Yeah. People don't realize that office space is actually small. It's a very small space. It's probably not any bigger than this stage. So I actually had to, obviously first convince my wife, right?
That's another.
Because
that's
that
a
is.
whole other
I
one.
think we've all, hey, we're amongst friends, and obviously there's always that significant other that's gonna push back on that.
She's been good.
Yeah.
She's been good.
Oh yeah. We got into some some arguments about it, but it comes with it, especially with the high end stuff. But for me, what I ended up having to do is realizing that I was limited on space, so I went up, right? So when you look at my collection room, and one of the compliments that I get is how much stuff I was able to put in there without it looking cluttered. And for me, that was very important. I didn't want it to look cluttered. Number one, because my wife was like, no, you're not getting like a man cave, like a frat boy man cave in there. Like, no, like, you get this space, and there's this big giant window too, that a lot of people don't realize that. And from our like family room, you could actually see into my Star Wars room. So I wanted to make sure it looked nice. Every piece got its own, respect, in my opinion. That's why if you see like my helmet wall, each one has its own little spotlight, and it's very specifically giving its respect. Each lightsaber, it's single. It's on a shelf by itself with a single light. And again, part of it was space limitation. I had to, right? So I had to go upwards. But actually, it ended up being, that's what makes it look impressive, because when you walk in, they're 10-foot ceilings. So like, you walk in and you're like, oh, wow. Like, and you actually could, enjoy it looking, through the whole collection. As opposed to if maybe I did have a few bookshelves or like, shelves that I kind of just, put stuff, which I used to, that's how I used to display my stuff. You kind of have to sort through it, as opposed to when you walk into now my collection room, each piece you could sit there and be like, okay, cool. And in fact, I just remodeled it this last week. There's a new section there, but I think that's the biggest obstacle, I think, for any collector, right?
Yes.
And especially the life size, the prop replicas, the studio scale, the bigger stuff. And in fact, even art, right? Even art, that ended up being the hardest thing because art takes up so much real estate, right? On the walls, because there's only so many posters, there's so many pictures you can put up. And in fact, even autographs, right? Because once you get those 8x10s autographs, on the wall, you're not going to be going to display them. You're going to have to put them in a book or so the plaques is a great.
And that's why I
Yeah.
stopped. For anybody who like collects 8x10s, I stopped collecting those because they were taking up space.
There you go.
Yeah, they were taking up
Yeah.
space. And what I ended up doing was I started getting plaques from our friend Ariel.
Yeah.
And what I was telling
Great
Gabe
work.
was I still have like my old school Trapper Keeper. It's a Star Wars one. And I was trying to find like the replicas, like the clear packs to be able to put the plaques on there. So then, you know, your book is not as bulky, it's thinner. But I feel like with the plaques, it's a lot easier to be able to store and have that.
Yeah, yeah. And Brendan, I'm kind of curious because again, you do a lot of art collecting, a lot of book collecting, like how you started incorporating the maquettes, right? Because that it's hard, especially when you're focusing on certain type of collection, then all of a sudden you're like you get into a different
Right.
type. Like, how did you what did you do? Did you
Yeah.
say, you know what, I'm gonna?
Well, I kind of had to trim down. I collected some Black Series over the years. Oh, that's a great picture of me. I collected some Black Series over the years, and then I really trimmed it all the way down because now the only Hasbro figures I have are like George Lucas in Stormtrooper Disguise or Jon Favreau as Paz Vizsla, like that kind of stuff where it counts as behind the scenes in my eyes at least. And then I actually work for Funko. I do the marketing for Funko, and so I have to be very careful, obviously, with all that. And so what I do mostly, I'm trying to think of the Funko I have, and it's all like the McQuarrie Funkos that they made, that kind of stuff. So again, it's just like it's being very specific of what you're going to collect and trimming that down because you're right. The books take up so much space. And then right now I have art displayed, but I used to do the marketing for Mondo, the poster company. So I have so much in these. You showed those binders, but I have huge, like 24 by 36 binders that all the posters are in underneath our bed, which is again another point of concern. But at some point, especially with the original art that I've been collecting, I really try to focus in on like black and white. That way, when I do have space, because we won't be in this, we rent a condo right now, but once I have a space for a gallery wall, it would be a lot easier just to kind of make it all very uniform and very nice. And then with my autographs, because I've been collecting autographs. I've been going to shows. I used to grow up in Dallas, so the Plano Center shows, and so I've been collecting autographs forever. And I've kept it very like the official pics, 8x10s and 11x14s. That is, I don't do table photos or anything like that. And then with Insider, I've been writing for Insider, and so I've been taking my magazines that have the people in it. So for instance, I'd interviewed Margot and Kevin Thompson for an Ewoks piece, so I brought my Ewoks piece for them to sign. So it's a little bit more manageable for me to at least like streamline down into what I'm going to get signed, why I'm going to get signed, and then try to at least make it sustainable in some small way. And storage is a huge part of that too.
And I must just say real quick, so a lot of you, I'm sure, have seen Gabe's room, and it has literally inspired thousands of people you will see out there that have taken off from what you did, you know, and you've always been very respectful, you know, reaching out and letting people know. And that's kind of how it started out on Collection Wars with that. But yeah, great job, man, on all that.
No, thank you. And again, that really is, you know, the goal, right? I think the community, the collector community, and just like in Star Wars, there's so many different communities out there, you know. Again, like, you got your droid builder community, and that's their thing. And you got the cosplay community, and you got, you know, there's so many different communities in Star Wars. And sometimes with the collecting community, even it's such a broad category, right? Because then you got the Funko collectors, and you got your Black Series collectors, and then you start going into the sideshow, right? The 6 scale collectors, the quarter scale collectors, right? And then even we're the 3rd scale collectors. Massive pieces, the prop replicas, and
don't forget life size. Did you say okay?
Life size, right? You got the prop replica, the life size, the screen used. Well, autographs, the screen used, right? And the screen used is kind of like where I think we all.
That's the next frontier.
Right.
Yeah.
That's like the ultimate thing. You know, we've had like people like Gus Lopez.
Yeah.
You know, if you guys have.
Y'all know
heard of
Gus Lopez?
who Gus Lopez is? Yeah. So Gus owns the Death Star
Yeah.
from A New Hope. Like the Death
I tried
Star.
to buy it. He wouldn't sell it to me.
in his living room.
It's
you know.
yeah, it's just in his living room, and he's giving us tours of his collection, and it's just insane
Yeah.
because it's all screen use stuff.
Yeah.
And of course, the screen use stuff, you know, hundreds, thousands, if not millions of dollars for each piece. And I think that's the funniest comment I always get with my prop replica stuff because, you know, prop replicas, as you guys know, I mean, they're not cheap. You know, they're thousands of dollars each. And there's always going to be that comment or that someone's like, oh, but they're not screen use. I'm like, that if I could find that screen use helmet, that's going to be a $2 million helmet. You know, there's just no way. Not only that, but most of it's in the archives, right? So look, obviously the history of it, after, what was it? I think Empire, they started, you know, keeping a lot of the stuff. It didn't get out of the set. And I think it's because they were learning a lesson. And you're going to be more knowledgeable about that, but they learned their lesson because a lot of the props they used from A New Hope ended up staying in the UK or just got tossed back or sent back to the rental places because they're renting them. So they kind of just got lost. So they had to recreate them for Empire and then Return of the Jedi. And that's why a lot of them changed. And that's why there's a lot of differences, especially on the lightsabers, right? If you notice, like Luke's lightsaber from A New Hope, or I don't see any prequel fans that I'm going to get yelled at. So I always call them the Luke sabers. But the Luke saber from A New Hope versus the Luke saber from Empire Strikes Back, you see there's differences, right? The rivets and all that. Well, that's because they had to recreate it because the original one kind of just got lost, right? They got rid of it. But I think as collectors, right, you just have to find your space. And I think the biggest piece of advice that I'm sure all of us could agree on is staying on target. You know, stay on target, because I think that's the hardest thing for me as a collector that's been, because there's so many cool things, right? And especially like the statues and all that. And you have to be very, very good about, you know, stay in your lane. Hey, look, if you're going to collect this, just do that. Because if you start going into different things, forget it. You're gonna have a whole house cluttered full of stuff, right? And money, financially too. I mean, you know, it takes a hit. So I think the biggest advice that I would say, and I want to go kind of through the panel, like, you know, advice as collectors, especially the high-end stuff. And I also want to talk about the significant other, or you know, but I think because that's a big part of it about collecting, because you. Yeah. Yeah, I blame my wife too. My wife was the first one that bought me a helmet, a master replicas. See? There you go.
Now that's a good wife right there.
I'm the same way.
That's
I'm
a
the
cool
same
wife.
way. My wife bought me my first prop replica, and now that's her fault, you know? But I think it's definitely, you know, being disciplined in that and kind of sticking to it. And that's the best thing, for at least for me, for my wallet, for my wife, is I decided early on it's only going to be licensed prop replicas, and I have some unlicensed, but that's my main focus, and it's only going to be original trilogy. That was going to be my straight focus, and then I even tailored it down to only Imperial stuff, like the helmets especially. I really try to focus on only Imperial helmets, and you know, the lightsabers, again, try to stick to original trilogy, although it's impossible to just stay there. But yeah, what advice would you guys give, as you know, for collectors out there? You know, I feel like this is like a group meeting, right? A therapy meeting here.
This is
Anonymous,
AA for
yeah.
toys.
It is AA.
Well, more than that, when you're talking about the significant other, that could get really bad. You got to be careful. No. So I kind of mentioned it a little bit. I think it's real simple, is to collect what you love. And, you know, it's funny because just recently I have this, my original action figures as one thing from my original, you know, that my mom bought me. It's no longer with me anymore. And so those figures are my absolute number one most meaningful thing in my collection. And I just recently took it from the gallery that I never got to see, and I brought it into the main house. And you know, being able to see my action figures every day is just, I know it's kind of weird, but I love it. I just what seeing those figures does for me. And then I start looking at all the things that I have. And if, I mean, I don't want to sell my stuff. I want it to be all buried with me. No, but yeah, exactly. But I think seriously, what I would suggest to anybody out there, again, it doesn't matter, and I always say this on the show, it does not matter how big or how small your collection is. And that's what's so good about Collection Wars and all of the community that follows our show is, you know, there's nobody snobby that I got more stuff. It's about the collecting and the inspiration that we get from each other on our collections, and of course the friendships that have been made. But when it comes to the collecting, figure out exactly what it is that you like. Find the space that you know that you have to collect, and just, you know, get the inspiration from other collections out there and make it the best that you can. Because I think it's kind of a crime that there's a lot of people that just hoard it all up and they've got it in closets and everything, and then you end up just selling it and you were never able to, you know, enjoy it. So sure, you have it, but do you get to enjoy it? So find those things, you know, and enjoy it. And one thing, when it comes to the spouse, I'm very blessed, like a lot of us in the room, I think, is my wife is a huge Barbie collector. She collects Barbies. Yeah, and yeah, thanks for all your support on the Barbies.
He's being very nice about it. She has the most beautiful Barbie collection.
Thank you.
Beautiful, and you guys can actually see it on YouTube. It's gorgeous.
Yes. So, and thank you for that. But yeah, so it's awesome when you have a spouse that you can collaborate with. I'll come in and Denise has her glass of wine and she's just, you know, cleaning her. She loves getting the old Barbies and restoring them that are, you know, that a kid pulled all the hair out and a little Sid got a hold of it, and Denise loves making them look new again. And so it's cool coming in there and seeing her, and then she'll support me and comes in and hangs out, and she's the one that, when people always, the most popular question on my YouTube is, how do you clean things? Well, my wife does it. It's really, she's awesome. She comes over and does that. You know, how do you keep the dust out, right? But yeah, that's my advice on the collecting side of things, and I think it's the real deal, you know?
I think on my end, I would stick in my advice to budget and to like what you're collecting, because it's tough with high-end stuff because it gets very, very expensive very quickly. And so I've had to be very conscious of, okay, like we're buying certain things every month or every 2 months or whatever it is. Payment plans are really helpful, but not to like overspend your means, right? You don't want to put
makes it worse. You buy it, right? The maquettes, you got every one of them, don't you? Yeah, exactly.
It's so, and so like for me, for instance, I take my freelance work, I made money from StarWars.com or Insider, and I put that into buying the pieces, right? So it's not even coming out of my normal paycheck or whatever it is, right? And then I think the second part is, as soon as something doesn't bring you joy, just move on with it. And it's helpful if you have been curated over time. The stuff that you have bought, you don't buy things to resell, but it does make it easier to pass those along, right? Especially for licensed collectibles, especially for collectibles that are in high demand. If you are collecting those things and they're no longer bringing you joy, it's a lot easier to make new space for your collection. And then I guess the final thing is there's easy entry points for this, right? You don't have to just start with the full size whatever, even though that's a good idea. Now I'm like, well, my wife should give me Han Solo and Carbonite. But there's, again, a lot of easy entry points. For instance, I said the cells already, but the storyboards, there are the photocopied storyboards from the original trilogy. You get a beautiful frame for your favorite scene would be $150, $200. But again, that is a pretty rare item that is used for the making of the movie. And you can do that even the found objects too. I know some of those, like I've been on a hunt for an actual Graflex, what they use for the lightsaber hilt for Luke's, Anakin, Rey's, whatever you want to say, saber, but with the stamp, with everything. And those kind of things are a lot more specific and are the same price as, and I shouldn't say this as someone that works for Funko, but same price as 10 Funko Pops, right? You know what I mean? So like you get to a point where you're able to kind of justify in your mind, especially if you're trying to curate your collection even more.
You basically stole everything I wanted to say.
Oh no.
Yeah, same thing. You know, I told my friend Tiara here, just like a little sister to me, but I told her, you know, she has 2 bookshelves, and I said, don't dive into this crazy rabbit hole. But yeah, budgeting is probably the best thing ever, and like with my significant other, he's wanting to buy me like a whole bunch of sideshow pieces, and I've told him no. And I've told him, like if you wanted to get me something like that, just get me like a Loungefly bag, because then I actually will use it. It's not just sitting there. And like for the girls that are in the room, yes, they're not expensive. They're only like, I think the most is like $80. So as you keep pulling more and more. But yeah, it's budgeting, I'm in the medical field, and, occasionally, I worked in the restaurant field, and that helped pay for medical school. So I still occasionally will bartend for the old company I was at for 11 years. And I use that as my, toy money. I don't touch any of my money. Like, none of my money from my medical field, job touches any of my collections. But yeah, I just budget just like that. And, if I pick something up and it doesn't bring me utter joy where I feel like a 6-year-old again, I'm not gonna buy it. And that's how I base off buying my collections. If I don't pick it up and I do not feel like that 6-year-old little girl who saw Star Wars, I don't wanna get it.
Yeah, absolutely. That all great advice. And again, because I think as collectors, and I think we all probably share that one thing. It's the
nostalgia.
It's nostalgia, but it's also maybe even like borderline OCD, where we want to complete collections, and we want to have everything, but at what cost, right? Because again, a complete collection versus 1 or 2 pieces that you like truly just love. It's better to have a smaller, more meaningful collection than a bigger, complete collection that doesn't bring you joy. But I want to open up the floor if anybody has any questions for the last 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Would love to answer any questions you guys have. Yeah.
So how do you handle insurance? Do you take insurance out on your collections, and how do you manage that as you change with your collection?
That's a great question. That's absolutely a correct question. I'll start. So mine is just through my homeowner's insurance. I don't have an additional policy, and the reason is because I document my collection very well, right? And I think that's the difference, is that my collection is well publicized on the internet, on YouTube, on any channel. So it's easier for me to be able to prove the cost to my insurance agency. There are other separate insurance companies that will secure collections, but again, you got to be very careful with those, because they have, again, something that's what's worth, right? The value is going to be hard to prove, because what are you going to do? Pull up an eBay listing and say this thing's worth $4,000, even though I paid $500 for it 10 years ago, So I personally go through just homeowners insurance. I don't know if anyone does anything different, but
I do have a separate policy for my collection.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
yeah. And it is, Gabe, very hard to document. I've got like 5 items that are very rare that I don't advertise. And, but just in case something's to go down, we do have the insurance on that. Yes, I do.
Yeah, mine is just through my homeowners.
Yep.
I think that's the norm.
Yeah.
That most people just have under your homeowners.
Mine's kind of similar like yours, Michael. So I do have like 7 items that I've never posted online. And I have those because those were things that were passed down to me before my father passed away, and they were really expensive Star Wars items.
Nice.
And I have those separate. I don't even have those in my house. They're actually in my bank.
Nice.
So yeah, because I'm petrified the day something ever happens to one of those. And you know how you said, if there's ever a fire in your house, what are you gonna get? And I'm small, so I won't be able to grab all those 7 items.
Yeah.
But I have 2 separate types of insurance. I have one for my house, which covers that portion. And you're speaking about the OCD. I'm one of those people where if I buy something, I have a PDF file. I document the date, time, the description of the item, and how much I paid for it, and I have that all on my laptop. And I think I've been doing that now for the past 12 years, where I document everything, even from little pictures, original magazines. I still have all the Time magazines from Star Wars, and I still have it when I got them. So that's where my crazy OCD kicks in with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
An Excel spreadsheet.
And it's
yeah.
and I think those things benefit very well because sometimes, like if you're having a conversation with somebody and you want to remember when you got it, I can always go back on my computer and be like, "Oh, yeah, I got this in 2001 and I remember it was at this day where I got it." And I kind of write like a brief description of like how I was able to acquire it.
Yeah. Yes, good.
What would you say is the absolute weirdest thing that you own?
Ooh, the weirdest thing. Ooh, I don't know about weirdest, but a buddy of ours, Jason, he worked on Galaxy's Edge, and he worked on some of the creatures that are in the cantina, and he had his casting from when he did it, and he let me have it, and he painted it up just like the cantina creature, and you see them. So whenever if you go to Disneyland, either one, Disneyland or Disney World, you see them in the tubs behind the beer taps. They're
With the boba in it? Is it that one?
they're in the big green ones, and they're actually hanging upside down. They're the Dagobah slugs. Yeah, they're the old Macquarie. It's actually a Macquarie concept art, and it's the Dagobah slug. And so so there's 5 of them out there in the world, 2 in Anaheim, 2 in Orlando, and then the 1. That is probably the weirdest one, just because it's like you have to be kind of a Disney fan and a Macquarie fan, like a behind-the-scenes fan, to kind of appreciate it.
Yeah, that's a hard one. I would think, just thinking what you're talking, I'm like, what is it? So I would say I've got a one-off. Tom at Regal Robot had built for Wonderfest what do you call the trash monster? What's his name?
Oh,
the
yeah.
the Diagnoga. Noga, yeah. So they had this contest on these studio scale Death Star towers, and we got a Diagnoga wrapped around, busting out, and it's a fantastic piece, and it's a one-off piece, and Tom at Regal Robot made that, and I was able to pick it up from him. So that's very weird.
I'm trying to think of like weird, because again, I interview people that worked on the movies, and so I have a few things that are not officially licensed that I love. There's one company that made, in the scale of the vintage Jabba, it was a cutaway. So it's the Jabba, but then it's cut away so that it has the 3 puppeteers inside as action figures with cigarettes and everything and it's very funny.
That's cool,
So I
though.
have that on the dais, and then with the Salacious Crumb, and then Don Bees, who played Boba Fett in Return of the Jedi, he custom made Funko Pops of himself. He's in the meme photo
Yes, I
of
have
like
his
of
autograph.
Dad Vader, it looks like and so he made custom Funko Pops that he made himself, but it's of the guy with the mustache, and he signed it. And I have that, and then I have there's Safubi, the Japanese Safubi, made it after Peter Mayhew's passing. They made Chewbacca, but then with a removable head, and it had Peter Mayhew's face with like the black eyeliner underneath. So it's those kind of things that like they're a little weird, and like no one would ever like make that, which I think Hasbro should make, like a Kenny Baker inside of an R2D2 or like C-3PO, but it's Anthony Daniels. Like I would buy that. So, but that kind of stuff is weird to me, at least.
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah.
So I think the weirdest thing that I own, and it's actually not Star Wars related. So my favorite horror film is The Exorcist, and I actually have a Pazoo, which is the little creature. It's like the little statue that they found in the beginning of the movie. So I own that, and I actually have the wall Pazoo on my wall. So when you walk into my house, I fair warn people like, hey, there's a face staring at you, like don't get creeped out. But you won't see it unless you come into my house. I try not to post that on social media because I like to scare the crap out of people when they walk into my house and see a massive Pazoo on the wall.
Right. Awesome. All right, we got about 5 minutes, so probably a couple more questions. Yeah.
What's the hardest thing you've ever had to sell, or that you've sold that was hard to let go?
Ooh, I think I'm gonna pass. I'm gonna pass this one.
Well, I've never sold anything.
I'm gonna answer for because we've talked about this. So Michael, early on, he had a Don Post Boba Fett, Fett life size that he just absolutely loved. And when he was younger, college years, he
Forgot all about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he decided that he was gonna go to a shop, and he left it there, took some money, and then
They were supposed to hold it. The guy said he would never sell it. He would, let me buy it back for the loan that I got off of it. And the when I did have the money to go back and get it. So I flew in to meet Don Post, and when this Boba Fett was being built, so Lucasfilm got 4, and I got the number 5, but I let it go, and when I came back to buy it, he had sold, his son or somebody had sold it. And I'm now in touch from our show Collection Wars that a guy in California has it, and that son of a gun won't sell it to me. But it's not even a real like complete accurate thing, but it was.
Yeah.
It was, yeah.
And that's why it popped in, because I think that was the greatest story, because again, as we're doing the show,
Yeah.
Michael's like, you're not gonna believe someone contacted me and he has it. And I'm like,
So I thought he was gonna. So I thought he was gonna. You can have it now.
wait, so and I'm gonna add to that story because
Yeah.
we only have a few minutes. But weirdest thing, so I already know about the Don Post one, and again, it's rare, right? One day I get a message, right, from Fred Durst. Fred Durst from Limp Bizkit, and he's like, "Hey man, I love your collection. I have something that you might be interested in." And he sends me pictures, and I'm like, "That's the Don Post Boba Fett." So I start asking him questions. So I'm like, "Oh my God, what if Fred Durst has Michael's Boba Fett, right?"
Yeah.
So then I started asking him for like the numbers and all that stuff, and I sent him to Michael, and he's like, "No, it's not that one." So I was
Yeah.
like, "Sorry, Fred, I'm not buying it."
Yeah. And that guy though that does have, we're friends now, and he's built a lot of fantastic life-size props, like our life-size Obi-Wan and the Luke Skywalker that's at Darkseid.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. I'm still a little,
I
bothered.
know we're running down on a time. Any just quick questions, just really quick? Right.
So you all have very like large followings on social media.
Yeah.
How did you did it start as a passion and the followers came later, or did it start as
Yes.
I'm going to do this page because I want to be this?
I think that's an easy answer for all of us, right? It's yes. It was the passion.
It was the
first.
passion.
Yeah.
How long did it take? Was it like every day posting every hour?
Nah.
No, and I think with posting, because I work in social media, with posting, it's just post what you like. And don't feel like you have to post every day or I have to do a reel or whatever it is. You have to post what you like, and if you are passionate about it, then followers will follow.
I think the only thing I will say with that, for me, it was because there's not a lot of women collectors out there, especially with large collections. So I've friends that I've made in Nashville here, they've known me because of my social media presence, and because I've been with, I have friends that collect certain vintage toys, and I was known for quite some time as the female vintage collector. So it just, you post what you love. And I'm one of those type of people, I've told Tierra this numerous of times, I can care less about followers. I do it because it's my passion. If you want to follow me, it's cool. And if you don't, I'm not going to cry over it.
Yeah.
I do it because it's what I love. It's gotten me to make friendships with these guys. I'm just now meeting him today.
Yeah.
But, I've known Gabe and Michael for quite some time, and we're really good friends. I can always just call them, and it's because of Star Wars.
Right. And we could have offline conversations. I'd love to talk about social media. I'm sure like a lot of us, but and strategy and all that stuff. We do have a giveaway, courtesy of Rebel Scum Con. Let's do something.
Can I be a part of it?
Really quick.
Can-
I know you want it.
I'm
I
a
think,
big gentleman.
You know what? I want to give this one, like just the question to Brandon, because obviously you're working on the encyclopedias.
Sure.
So you're gonna have some cool, just off the top of your head, a cool little trivia question that we might be able to throw out there.
I mean, I'm just gonna what place on Tatooine did this?
And you got to raise your hand.
Yes, did this stormtrooper appear?
Okay, say that again.
So this is from the scene where they say, "These aren't the droids you're looking for."
Yes.
Right.
Oh, that's
What city in Tatooine was that? Ooh. I saw this hand up first.
Oh,
Mos Eisley.
Mos Eisley. There it is.
honestly. All right,
Congratulations.
That's easy enough. Here you go. Well,
Yeah, hey, I don't.
You're
Hey,
welcome.
I don't recommend you do it. I'll be happy to offer you a little something for that if you don't want it. 'Cause it's a bad rabbit hole. I'm telling you right
Yeah,
now.
those.
I
Yeah,
just
Michael.
I collect the McCory ones of those. Right?
Oh,
They do
yeah.
that.
Yeah,
That's
I have
all.
the
That's
So
all
I
have.
collect all of them.
Well, thank
That's a
you.
very
Corey
cool.
one is beautiful.
Thank you guys again for sticking
your
around.
time. Thank y'all.
Appreciate
Thank y'all.
it so
Thank you,
much.
Eric.
Thank you guys.
And yeah, if you guys have any questions afterwards, obviously feel free to reach out.
Yep. Thank
you
you.
guys.